It's always a strange feeling when the season ends and everything suddenly goes quiet. And that's where the 49ers are right now. No more press conferences, no more locker room access, no more weekly rhythms. Levi's Stadium is already shifting into Super Bowl mode, and for San Francisco, that visual alone is a reminder that the focus has officially moved to the offseason. And once you hit this part of the calendar, the conversation always turns to one thing: change. Some of it is obvious, like roster decisions and cap moves. Some of it is quieter, but just as important, and that's where Robert Saleh enters the picture. Saleh landing the Titans' head coaching job immediately raised eyebrows around the league, but especially in Santa Clara. Anytime a former 49ers coach takes a head job, the natural question becomes who might follow him. Staff continuity matters more than fans sometimes realize, and even losing one trusted assistant can ripple through a building. That's why the early chat around Saleh's staff has been worth paying attention to, even before his introductory press conference happens. If you're Kyle Shanahan, you're not just rooting for a friend, you're also protecting your operation. Now, let me throw this one directly to you. Do you think Saleh ends up taking at least one coach from the 49ers staff? Yes or no? Drop it in the comments, because I think fans are more split on this than they realize. And while you're there, make sure you're subscribed. We're pushing hard toward 1,000 subscribers, and if you want steady, no-nonsense off-season coverage, that support really matters. What makes this situation interesting is timing. Saleh and Shanahan have already talked, and those conversations don't happen casually. They're about boundaries, permissions, and expectations. Some moves can be blocked, others can't. Promotions change the rules entirely, and that's where things can get complicated fast. From the outside, it might feel like nothing is happening yet, but behind the scenes, these are active, ongoing discussions that will shape how both teams look next season. This chapter is really about setting the table. Before we get into names, roles, and hypotheticals, you need to understand the framework. Who is likely staying put? Who realistically could leave? And why certain areas of the staff are far more stable than others? In the next part, we're going to zero in on one specific unit where the answer is already becoming clear, and it might be one of the quieter wins of the entire offseason for the 49ers. One area where things are already settling down is special teams, and that's important because stability there has been rare for the 49ers in recent years. When Robert Saleh took the Titans' job, some fans immediately wondered whether Brant Boyer could be on the move, especially given their shared history with the Jets. On the surface, that makes sense. Coaches tend to trust people they've worked with before. But once you dig into how these contracts and roles actually work, the picture becomes much clearer. Assistant coaches are usually on rolling multi-year deals, and special teams coordinators are no exception. That means Boyer isn't sitting on an expiring contract where he can just walk out the door. For him to leave for another special teams coordinator job, Kyle Shanahan would have to approve it, and there's really no incentive to do that. It wouldn't be a promotion, it wouldn't benefit the 49ers, and it would create unnecessary disruption. On top of that, Saleh has already decided to retain John Bones Fassel in Tennessee, one of the most respected special teams coordinators in the league. That decision alone essentially shuts the door on any speculation about Boyer following Saleh. From a 49ers perspective, this is quietly good news. Special teams were a problem for a long time, and last season there was a noticeable shift. The unit wasn't perfect, and the playoff loss made that painfully obvious, but over the course of the season, there was real progress. Personnel decisions mattered. The additions, the flexibility Boyer was given, and the emphasis placed on that phase of the game all showed up more often than not. That's not something you want to reset again unless you absolutely have to. Let me ask you this directly. Do you feel more confident in the 49ers special teams now than you did a year ago? Yes or no? It's a simple question, but I think the answer says a lot about how much progress was actually made. If you like these deeper breakdowns that go beyond box scores, hit the like button and make sure you're subscribed. Every subscription helps us get closer to that 1,000 subscriber goal, and it allows this kind of coverage to keep going all offseason. So while special teams look locked in, that doesn't mean the entire staff picture is settled. Far from it. Other roles carry different rules, different leverage points, and much bigger implications if changes happen. And that's where things get more complicated, especially when promotions enter the equation and certain moves can't be blocked, no matter how much a team might want to keep things exactly as they are. This is where the conversation really starts to matter, Because once you move beyond special teams, the rules change. Coordinator jobs are a different animal in the NFL, and that's where Robert Saleh potentially has real leverage. If he identifies someone on the 49ers staff as his preferred coordinator, and that move is considered a promotion, the 49ers can't simply block it. That's written into the league rules, and it's why these situations always create at least a little tension behind the scenes. Defensive coordinator is the most obvious place to look. Saleh is a defensive coach at his core, and if there's someone in the 49ers building he believes is ready for that role, he's allowed to make that move happen. That doesn't mean it will happen, but it does mean it's on the table. This is the part of the offseason where teams quietly assess not just players, but future coaches. And the 49ers have several assistants who are well respected around the league. That's a compliment to Shanahan's staff, even if it creates short-term uncertainty. Offensively, things are more complicated. Kyle Shanahan values continuity on that side of the ball, and that shows in how the staff is structured. Clay Kubiak already carries the offensive coordinator title, and while he has interviewed for jobs around the league, the expectation is that he remains with the 49ers. That title matters. It changes how other teams can approach him, and it limits what Saleh could realistically do without creating a much bigger negotiation. It's not impossible, but it's far less straightforward than the defensive side. Think about this for a second. If Saleh could take one assistant from the 49ers, and it had to be someone you actually miss, who would it be? Drop that name in the comments. These kinds of moves don't always grab headlines, but they shape seasons in subtle ways. And if you want to stay ahead of this stuff as it develops, make sure you're subscribed and have notifications on. Off-season coaching news moves fast. We're getting closer to 1,000 subscribers with every new follow. The key thing to understand is that none of this happens in a vacuum. Shanahan and Saleh are talking. There's respect there, but there are also boundaries. Some requests will be fine, others won't. The end result will probably be a mix of cooperation and protection, with each side doing what's best for their organization. And while staff movement gets most of the attention right now, it's only one piece of a much bigger offseason puzzle that directly affects how this roster is built moving forward. Once you zoom out from the coaching carousel, the bigger picture comes into focus, and that's the direction of the roster itself. There's been a lot of talk about a so-called reset, and I think that word gets misunderstood. This wasn't a teardown, and it wasn't a rebuild. What the 49ers really did was rebalance. They cut cash in certain areas to create flexibility elsewhere, and that distinction matters when you're evaluating what comes next. Some familiar names are already gone, and that naturally makes fans uneasy. Trades, releases, and letting high-priced free agents walk are never popular moves in the moment. But at the same time, the front office doubled down on the core. Brock Purdy got the richest contract in franchise history. George Kittle and Fred Warner were extended. That tells you everything you need to know about how this team views its competitive window. They still believe they can win now, even as they get younger around the edges. This is where the Nick Bosa question always comes up, and it's worth addressing head-on. Trading a superstar sounds bold in theory, but it's rarely the right move when you still have a championship-caliber nucleus. Moving a player like that creates more holes than it solves, and it sends a message that doesn't align with how this organization operates. The smarter play is what the 49ers are doing now, trimming where they can, staying flexible, and positioning themselves to add the right kind of player if an opportunity presents itself. Let me get your take on this. Would you trade a star player if it meant getting younger overall? Yes or no? It's an uncomfortable question, but it's one every contender eventually has to face. If you appreciate these honest conversations about roster building, hit the like button and make sure you're subscribed. We're closing in on 1,000 subscribers. Your support directly fuels this kind of coverage. The goal isn't to chase big names just because they're recognizable. It's to find players who are still ascending, who fit what the 49ers want to do, and who don't require mortgaging the future. That philosophy applies to free agency, trades, and especially the draft. And when you start talking about the draft, there's one position group that always sparks debate, one that quietly ties the past to the future, and that's where we're headed next. When the conversation turns to the draft, it almost always circles back to the offensive line, and for good reason. This is one area where philosophy really shows up, and the 49ers have been remarkably consistent. Chris Forster has a significant voice in these decisions, especially because offensive linemen have to fit the system, not just the position. It's not about grabbing alignment early to satisfy public pressure. It's about finding the right player at the right value. That's why you don't see panic picks. The 49ers stick to their board, even when it frustrates people on the outside. If an offensive lineman they truly like is gone, they don't reach. They take the highest graded player they believe fits their long-term vision. That approach hasn't changed, and there's no real indication that it will dot it. Mirrors the old Bill Walsh mindset, trusting the process rather than forcing the need and paying for it later. At the same time, the future is clearly on their minds. Trent Williams won't play forever, and preparing for life after him has to be part of the plan. That doesn't mean drafting his replacement at the top of the board just to say you did it. More likely, it means targeting someone in the middle rounds who can contribute early, maybe a guard, and then transition into a bigger role down the line. That kind of development path fits how this staff thinks and how this roster is built. So here's the question for you. Which round would you target an offensive lineman if you were running the draft? Drop your answer in the comments. And if you've made it this far, do me a favor and subscribe if you haven't already. We're pushing toward 1,000 subscribers, and this channel is going to be all in on draft coverage and offseason analysis. That wraps up the full breakdown from coaching, movement to roster philosophy to draft strategy. Before we move forward, let me know what you'd like next.